Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mind Your Nest. I'm your host, Jennifer Rosen, and I'm so excited to have my guest in studio today. Her name is Suzette Bravo, and I'm going to tell you how we met. I think it was last year. I was at Fort Lauderdale Airport looking to go on a girls' trip with two of my girlfriends, Robin and Renee, and we were waiting to take off. And due to unforeseen circumstances, weather in Florida, I've now been told that I should definitely take a morning flight out whenever I'm traveling. However, last year that wasn't the case. So we were waiting at the gate to take our direct flight from Fort Lauderdale to Nashville, and the flight kept getting delayed. So we were waiting in line every time they said we're about to board. And then the disappointment came a few minutes later when they said, we're delayed again. So the last time they said we're about to board, my friend Robin and Renee, they were talking to some other people, and I saw this woman standing in line. I'm like, I think I'm going to just go get in line next to her. And we started chatting. And lo and behold, it's Suzette Bravo. She's gorgeous, number one. And she was going to a conference in Nashville. And we just started chatting and connecting. And we kept in touch after this chance meeting at the airport. I wound up actually reaching out to her, I don't know, maybe 6 months after we started chatting. I actually was a guest on her podcast, which she's going to talk about, and been really this little bird on my shoulder of inspiration, and she's just a powerhouse. Without further ado, Suzette, hi.
Hi, and Jennifer, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I love how we call them chance meetings, but I don't really believe anything's by chance. And I was so inspired and moved by you and who you were and the courage that you talked about with moving here to Florida and everything that you were doing. So I'm just really honored and excited that we've stayed connected and stayed friends.
Yeah, me too. And you have taken my hand in a way and opened up the world of strong women. And I got to attend an event with Wendy Bloom, which was amazing, where I was surrounded by other women, very strong women. And it was really amazing. So thank you for that. You've really helped to open up my eyes a lot since I met you. Tell me about yourself.
Oh boy, there's a loaded question.
It is. And you could start from whatever point you want. You know where we're going to go with this.
Okay. I have lived in Florida for about 30 years that we were just talking about. I am a women's leadership and empowerment coach. I work with women around building self-confidence, building self-awareness, stepping into a life that they truly desire versus living a life that's been planned for you by somebody else, which a lot of us tend to fall into mostly by accident. And I've been coaching for about 8 years. Before that, I was in healthcare. I did physician practice management for about 15 years, had my own business, loved it, but healthcare world started to change. I realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore. Exited out of that in around 2014. A big catalyst to that and a big piece of my story and who I am now. I lost my husband in January of 2013, and it was a very pivotal moment for me in my life because what I found after he passed away from a brain tumor, and it was really quick. He was diagnosed actually 8 days before he passed away. So it was very quick, and all of a sudden I'm waking up and my entire world has been rocked. And what I realized moving through the grief with losing him was I had significant trauma in my childhood that I thought I had dealt with, but essentially I had suppressed and buried. And when this happened in my life and knocked me on my butt, everything came up, all of it. And I tried my damnedest to suppress all of it because that's what I do. And I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. I had to turn and face all of the things in my life. I had to face the trauma. I had to face the grief. I had to face everything that I was going through. I had to face a lifetime of living an existence that I thought everybody else wanted from me, that was not truly the life that I wanted for myself. Started working on my trauma, went to therapy. That helped a little bit. Got into some somatic work, which was really helpful.
And can you describe what that is?
So somatics is more about the body. A lot of us who have experienced trauma, we store that trauma in our body. And I had done years and years of talk therapy, so I could logic my way through what had happened to me, how it affected me, and where it was showing up. I could explain it to you. I could put it in these big words. And in my mind, it all made sense. But I never truly connected to what it was doing to me physically, where it was stored in my body. And one of my superpowers is what my therapist calls dissociation. And that is basically when we can logic and get really in our head about things, we forget that we're a whole human being. So we're mind, body, spirit. I was very much in my mind, and I had to reconnect with my body because over the years I had really disconnected from my physical. That led me to some breath work, that led me to yoga, a bunch of other modalities. But as I started moving through my own healing process, and as I started to tell my story about what I had been through, what was really profound for me was when I opened up and started talking about what I had been through, which is all part of releasing the shame and the guilt that we hold sometimes and through some of our experiences. I was amazed by how many women would get this look on their face, and there would be like almost like this sigh and this, oh my God, me too. And I found that by sharing my story and connecting to who I was authentically and bringing that forward and being open with it, I gave other women permission to do the same.
Exactly. I've been in those situations where I've been listening to yourself, to people like you, sharing their stories, getting vulnerable, and you could see and sense the relief almost like when you're sharing your story. And I'm sure maybe it felt like that the first time you did. It's almost like you can relax your shoulders a little bit because you're moving through getting all of this out of your body, and it's healing for you in a way to tell the story the first time, and then maybe it feels the same the 20th time that you're sharing your story. And I would imagine that you see that look on the other women's faces that you're talking with, that maybe it makes your shoulders relax a little bit more because you know you're connecting with other people who understand, not understand your story, but understand as it relates to their own story. And maybe it ignites permission for them, like you were describing, for them to maybe start sharing as well.
Yeah, and I think when we've been through a traumatic experience or we've been through some sort of darkness, we call it big T trauma or little t trauma. When you've been through something, depending on what you've been through, how you've been through it, like I alluded to a little bit, one of the things we tend to take out of that is shame. Sometimes we have shame about what's happened to us or what we've done, or we have guilt, and we tend to feel like we're alone. So
Exactly.
When you suppress that, it becomes a very isolating thing. And have you ever seen the show Ted Lasso?
No.
Okay. It's hands down one of the greatest TV programs that has ever existed in the world. That is my personal opinion.
I will have to add that to my list.
Thank you.
You.
It's profound.
It's epic. You have to see it.
Okay,
Yes,
I will.
100%. And there's a scene, I forget what season it was in, and Ted Lasso is the coach of a Premier League soccer team. And they just lost a big game, and he's talking to them about the loss and being sad. And what he's saying is, and I'm butchering this, is certainly not verbatim, but he was basically saying it's one thing to be sad. It's another thing to be sad and alone. And I think that's one of the worst things we ever do to ourselves when we're going through something is we want to isolate.
Yeah.
And coming together, especially with other people who get you, who see you, who want to support you and are there for you, is so powerful, because when we realize that we're not alone, it shifts the narrative, which is one of the reasons why I get so excited when I meet women like you. I'm in a group called the Daily Drip, And
I think I've seen them before.
oh, yeah, the most incredible group of women I've ever encountered. And I've been with them, I think, maybe a year and a half. And I remember the first time I walked in the room, looking around the table at these successful entrepreneurs, professionals, like these women who had it all together. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? What do I have to offer? Those voices in our head love when the meeting of the Mean Girls Club shows up.
Oh, I like that saying.
Yeah. But what I realized when they started talking is it doesn't matter how much on the surface it looks like you've got everything together. We've all got our stuff. And what I loved about this group is they're not only willing to talk about their stuff, but they will show up and help you with your stuff. No matter what, like the way everybody supports each other and shows up for everybody is just amazing. And I love this group so much. I can't say enough really wonderful things about them, but there's so much power in that community and knowing that somebody's got your back and knowing that somebody cares enough to listen and to show up and be supportive. And I think that's one of the primary things that I try to push with the women I work with is finding community.
That is so important. How did you, when you first switched after the trauma, the passing of your husband, where was the first place that you went to as you started to feel stronger and knew that you needed to connect with other women? Did you ask for somebody's hand to help you, or did you do the groundwork on your own to find a place?
Oh, God, no. I didn't ask for help.
Why would we do that?
I know. Why would I do that? No, listen, I got this. I can muscle through, right?
Yep.
But the universe shows up.
Yeah,
And
I do agree with that.
I was working out through a gym called BB3, which my dear friend Billy Beck, he was amazing. But my trainer at the time was Gavin. And Gavin also had another woman that he was training, and her name was Danny. And Gavin kept telling Danny and I about each other and how we needed to meet each other. I was in the midst of grief from losing my husband. Danny was in the midst of grief from a divorce. So we were both reeling from our losses. And both of us were like, yeah, no, we're good. I don't need another friend right now. I got enough going on. And so we actually ended up meeting each other at an event down in Miami. It was an obstacle race called Armageddon Ambush. And Danny was there with a team of her friends, and I was there with a team from the gym. And we met each other, and she told the story.
Was it a random meeting? Or
random
did you
meeting.
plan? Okay.
No, random meeting. And so Gavin introduces us, and I'm like, oh, you're the badass chick that Gavin keeps telling me about. And Danny tells the story. She's like, yeah, she complimented me immediately. We were friends. But what happened was Danny and I connected and became the best of friends. And we have moved through so many things together over the last 10 plus years. And she was my entry into a lot of things. She came from a world of a lot of self-development programs and growth and things like that. And I came in with some of my stuff, and we just immediately connected and had been each other's rocks for the last 10 years. She moved to Colorado last year, which has been her lifelong dream. And I'm still figuring out what mine is. So the universe sent her to me in like my very darkest time. And I'm so grateful for that because, like I said, I don't know what either one of us would have done without the other. But we were just always there for each other. We figured it out, and we were very similar in a lot of things and different strengths and weaknesses. And we were there for each other, and it's been really special. And I brought her into my community. She brought me into hers. And again, it's just coming together, being supportive and loving of each other, empathy. Both of us have cried together, like all of it. And I didn't outwardly ask for help, but I know somewhere inside the universe knew that's what I needed.
Oh, yeah. You were probably emitting signals.
Oh, big time.
Like
Yeah.
that.
And now I'm like, hey, like, I don't have this together. I need help. And I've gotten much better at that.
Yep.
But at that point in my life, I was all about muscling through everything.
Yeah. You were in survival mode.
1,000,000%.
And did that help you with your empowering business?
Yes.
When you met her?
Yes. 1,000,000%. I went to my first Tony Robbins event with her.
Really?
Yeah. And
How was that?
It was crazy.
Was it a
insane.
one day only, or was it a weekend thing?
No. So Tony has a progression of his programs, and his entry-level program is I think it's Unleash the Power Within. But we started off with his week-long program called Date with Destiny, which is, people have told me that's the equivalent of diving into the deep end of the pool. It was an amazing experience. It was life-changing. And I dove into the deep end of the pool from there. And immediately I was like, okay, like I can't get enough of this stuff. And I started devouring everything I could get my hands on in the self-development world, which is great. And I'm all about growth and self-development. But here's where self-development becomes challenging especially when part of your operating system and your core belief is that you're not worthy.
Right.
The next thing, and you'll be fixed. And then the next thing after that, and you'll be fixed. Do this, and you'll be fixed. Do that, and you'll be fixed. And growth is wonderful, but we have to do a better job. I am all about awareness and acceptance of who and where we are now. Because if you're not solid in who and where you are now, you can get led down any road believing that's going to fix you. And nothing outside of yourself is ever going to be enough to fill a hole that's within.
That is so profound. I mean, it's so meaningful what you just said.
We go about chasing, I call it shiny object syndrome, and I'm certainly guilty of this. We go about chasing the next thing outside of ourselves that is going to be the thing that's finally going to make us feel good.
Right.
And nothing outside of us is the answer. The answer lies within. And it doesn't have to be shiny and perfect. And we can have our scars. We can have all of that. And the fact of the matter is, to use an analogy that I think most people get, if you're going on a trip and you need to put your address into your GPS, you can tell your GPS where you want to go, but it can't give you good directions unless it knows where you're at.
Right.
And life is that way. And especially when we carry stories of not being worthy and not being good enough, it doesn't matter what you do externally. If you are operating from a space that you're not worthy or you don't deserve what it is that you're going after, you will sabotage yourself, because that is the driving subconscious belief. And that is what needs to be addressed. That is what needs to be healed. For some of us, it's inner child work. For some of us, it's forgiveness. It doesn't matter what it is, but that core wound needs to be addressed.
God, you've said so many truisms about growth and acceptance and going through life, growing up, falling down, getting back up, falling down again. I do believe that the falling down and the pain and the hurt and the trauma at whatever level, that's the reality of living a life well lived, even though you wouldn't believe that to be true, because how could having trauma in your life be a positive thing? But nobody escapes trauma. Nobody escapes a certain level of shame in their life. At least I don't believe that to be true. There are hundreds of millions of people in the world. From my personal experience, unfortunately, that's what happens. Some people are open, like yourself, like me, that are able to talk about that because we've done the work, at least so we think, at the point where we're ready to share. And it is a liberating feeling when you can say those words out loud. One of the things that made me really think about you and what I had learned about you and your growth and your life experiences, especially as it related to trauma, was something that happened to me and my family last year. My ex-husband, who was in recovery for over 19 years, relapsed, and then several months later he attempted suicide. My kids had never known their dad not to be in recovery, and none of us had ever known anybody that attempted suicide, except for my son being in recovery himself. He had lost several people to overdose and suicide and whatnot. And I was back and forth to Palm Desert, California 3 times within 3.5 months with my kids, and then by myself the third and final time. And I'm really good in a crisis. I can table the emotions, and then I can just get down to the business at hand. Booking a flight in less than 12 hours, getting on a plane, taking control, taking charge, doing what we needed to do in that crisis and dealing with the medical system as it relates to how they treat people that are suffering from severe mental illness, addiction, and everything in between. But I will say that when I got back the third and final time in like the first week of January of this year, I was so exhausted. And I've been exhausted before from all the different trauma that I've gone through in my life, specifically when I left my ex-husband almost 23 years ago. October 29th will be 23 years that I left. But again, I never gave myself permission to deal with the trauma and the exhaustion because I had to get up the next day and go to work, and I had to make sure my kids were taken care of and all that. And there really wasn't time to deal with all that stuff. And the only time that I really did in my past was when I was at my therapist's office. And it was really good. I knew what I wanted to go in there and talk about. A lot of it was situational, but it helped me get through each step of the long journey of being a single mom. But when I got back from California in January and I got home and it was quiet, I couldn't move. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to stay in bed because I knew that you can't keep this pace up of dealing with the trauma, of tabling the emotion of the trauma that you're going through and just focus on the business at hand. At some point, I realized that I'm not a robot and I am a human being and I do have emotions and feelings and a heart and all of those things. But in the time of crisis, I don't acknowledge those things because I know I have to take care of stuff. So when I got back and I laid in bed and I couldn't really think about my next move, I left the business world when all of this started happening after a chance meeting was sitting next to somebody on the flight out to California the first time. I just needed to figure out how to get up and really start dealing with everything that just happened. Being there for my kids and helping them go through all of their emotions with this and fear and shame, obviously. When it comes to addiction and attempted suicide, it's not something that is a daily conversation with a lot of people. And it took me a bit to acknowledge the fact that this was suppressed trauma for all of these years. And like you said, it was really the caveat to let it all out. I think when you were describing when your husband passed away, I thought, okay, this event is just opening up the can. And all these emotions, not just from the past 23 years of being a single mom, but going even further back into things of my childhood, when I was a teenager, all these things just started coming to the surface. And I was like, oh my God, like, how is this possible? But I guess at a certain point, your brain is like, all right, we're going to start dealing with this shit. You're not getting a pass anymore.
100%. We all have a junk drawer in our closet where you stuff you don't really want to deal with.
Right.
And just like eventually that drawer, that closet is going to get overflowing. We're the same way as humans. And especially when it comes to suppressing, because what happens when we suppress and we get numb to things is you can't pick and choose what you're numb to.
Right.
You become numb not only to the feelings of sadness and anger and things like that, you become numb to any kind of joy and love. And to protect yourself and to stay behind those walls, that's exactly what you have to do. You build walls and you isolate yourself and you live a very small percentage of your life. And honestly, that's not why we're here. We're here to fully express and be who we're supposed to be. And I really want to acknowledge you for sharing what you just shared. And you and I have talked a little bit about that before. And there's big feelings and there's so many layers to that. There's so many layers with what you were experiencing, what he was experiencing, what your kids were experiencing. And I'm going to speak to a woman's experience through this. I know men go through this as well, but we want to show up for everybody else. We want to nurture. And I remember after Andrew passed away, one of the hardest parts of that was telling his kids. It was gut-wrenching.
I'm sure.
And part of the way that we avoid our stuff is by showing up for everybody else.
Right.
which is great. Like, I'm all about being loving and nurturing, but at the same time, we have to extend that same love and nurturance and support to ourselves. And it is okay to stay in bed and cry. It is okay to decide, I'm going to eat pizza and Netflix binge for 24 hours as I move through this. And we have to give ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling. And I'm not suggesting that we allow those feelings to overtake, but we have to feel them.
Right.
And sometimes it's, depending on what you're going through, sometimes it's saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to give myself 30 minutes. I'm going to cry. I'm going to scream. I'm going to yell. I'm going to do whatever I need to do. But we store those emotions in our body. And if we do not allow them to process and move through, they sit in there and they become like a squatter living inside of your body.
Right.
And it's going to show up. It's going to show up at some point and in some way. And maybe it's flying off the handle at something that somebody says to you that's completely outer limits, or it's leading to addiction. The mind works in so many different ways, and allowing ourselves to feel the shame, allowing ourselves to feel guilt, allowing ourselves to feel anger. We're told that we're not supposed to be angry.
Right.
We're just supposed to be whatever all the time. Anger means somebody crossed your boundaries. We're entitled to feel that. And yes, we do have a responsibility for being emotionally intelligent in how we handle that, especially with other people. But it's okay to feel it. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel all of this, because when you allow yourself to go there, you process it, then you can move through it.
Yep.
The only way to move through something is to move through it. You can't just suppress it.
Yeah, and you can't go around. You can't go in a different direction.
No, because it will find you.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. One of the other things that I wanted to share is I have two kids. My daughter Rachel's in her senior year at University of Florida in Gainesville, and my son Noah's going to be 24 and getting ready to move out. And I will say that of late, I do believe that my daughter has started to experience something similar to what I experienced earlier this year or years ago, with the suppression of shame and emotions and other things, where it just started to come out with her. And like you said, sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes decades, and sometimes you're lucky that it comes out sooner, so you have the ability to really deal with it head on. And I'm so proud and grateful that she has a good head on her shoulders and is taking the next right step to help herself and focus on herself. I've always talked about the oxygen mask theory, which is sometimes years ago I thought it was such a crock. I'm like, please, how can I put my oxygen mask on first when I have two babies? Like, it sounds great in theory, but really maybe in 20 years I'll be able to do that. But I do believe in that at my core, but the reality of that, depending on where you are in your life, isn't really true. As I've gotten older, I have really worked hard, which you wouldn't think you'd have to work so hard to put your oxygen mask on first, but I have. And there is something liberating about that, and to myself, but to other people who are not used to you putting your oxygen mask on first, they might find it off-putting because they perceive that to be, you are so selfish. All you think about is yourself. And I remember people would say that about my dad. And he was a selfish guy, whatever. He would, when he was at a restaurant, he would order for the table and he would order what he liked. So he knew that at least one person was going to be happy with the meal, which I appreciated. But the oxygen mask theory isn't selfish. And helping my daughter come to that understanding and to encourage her to not speak about everybody else's issues and then hers last, but to say, please take care of yourself. Please put yourself in the number one spot. Please think about how this is impacting you first before anything else. And it does take some time and training and programming your brain in a way to think like that. Some people, I do believe, are naturally like that, depending on what their life is like, whether they're single, married, whatever, with kids, without kids, dogs, the whole thing. But I do think that, as you described, the programming or the subtle programming that we all at some point in our life were under all of those years when we were young, through all of our years and potentially through adulthood. We just do what we're used to doing until something happens, hopefully, that says, wait a minute, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And it is okay. And I do matter. And I matter more to anyone else, because really, if I don't deal with this shit, then I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to be around anymore to have the opportunity to work on this shit that has been hidden and suppressed for so long. But it's scary. It really is. There is some comfort in staying in your old habits. Even though you want to try to cross that bridge, you want so badly. And I remember one therapist saying to me many years ago, she was fantastic. Her name was Bobby. She was a cute little like bubby lady. Two of my girlfriends and I, we all saw her. We loved her to pieces. And I think I was talking to her about something, and I said, oh, I'm going to try to do that. She's, wait a minute. I said, what? She's, try to get out of that chair. I'm like, Bobby, what are you talking about? She said, do it. Try to get out of that chair. I said, oh, you're crazy. Third time, Jennifer, try to get out of that chair. And I stood up. She said, see, you don't have to try. You just have to do it. And it is like a little switch in your brain. It really is. And sometimes that's all you need to enlighten yourself, to believe that is possible, where before that, you thought it was never going to happen, not in your lifetime. Would you ever believe that you could actually just get up and do it because you never tried before?
Yeah, and I love that, because that is just such a very fine distinction in how you think. And something that's part of my program, and it's part of the framework that I use when I'm working with women, is there's two forces that are happening simultaneously. And let's say you want to run a marathon, okay? So you start training to run the marathon, and there's these things you need to do. You need to train, running certain days of the week, eating right, all of these things. And when you look at the things that you need to do, that's great. And say your training's going well, you're moving along. You wake up one morning, you're supposed to train, but it's raining outside, and it's early, and you don't feel like doing it. If these are just things that you're doing to move along, you're probably not going to get up and go for that run. One of the things that I coach on quite a bit is the combination between your identity, who you are, and what you do. Because if you're training for a marathon, you need to understand your why behind that. And the quickest way to get to the person that you want to be. So when you're training for a marathon, especially if it's something you've never done before, you don't know what it's going to feel like. You're stretching. You're putting yourself out of your comfort zone, and that's really uncomfortable. They call it a comfort zone for a reason, because it's comfortable there. But you don't grow in your comfort zone, and it can be scary. What if I fail? What if people see me fail? What if I get hurt? What if this happens? What if that happens? People are going to laugh at me. Okay, I get it. That's all really terrifying. One of the keys to working through something that's scary, through something that's new, has to do with taking on the identity. And it's taking on the identity of, I am a marathon runner. What does a marathon runner do? But the shift in the identity and the things that you're doing happen simultaneously, but one sort of relies on the other. Mm-hmm. If you see yourself as the marathon runner, a marathon runner gets up and goes for the run. There's no question. Once you start to see yourself that way, you start to do the things that person does. So it's really important to have a vision in your mind of who you want to become. And this vision needs to be big enough that it pulls you forward, because it is that vision of what you're going after and who you want to be that is going to drag you out of bed when you don't want to get out of bed. I love affirmations to a point, but if you're just standing in the mirror every day saying, I'm a marathon runner, I got this, but you're not doing anything to back that up, your brain, because your brain is really smart and knows the truth, it's in there going, no, you're not. You're full of shit. You are not. There's these two things happening simultaneously. And as you take these baby steps and as you prove to yourself through these little baby steps and you get closer and closer, then when you're like, I'm a marathon runner, your brain's like, damn right you are.
That's awesome. There is something that my daughter and I have talked about recently, and that is our distaste for working out. And for some reason, even growing up a tennis player, I started playing tennis when I was 9, all the way through, I don't know, when I went away to college. I loved it. I was good at it. I was fast. I was fit. I was in shape. I felt fantastic every time I was on the court. Really only liked playing with guys when I did it outside of my structured tennis lessons, because I always felt like they made me a better player and I was able to focus, and it wasn't about wearing pretty little tennis skirts or tennis shirts. And I just wanted to put on my hand-me-down t-shirt and whatever shorts and get on the court and play. And that was great. I felt fantastic. And then I don't know, all of a sudden, because I was heavy from a very early age, I stopped really moving my body. I would ride the bike. This is all before I went away to college. And I don't know what happened. Growing up, there are some people that make moving their body and exercising, it is part of their life. It is like brushing their teeth twice a day. They never miss a day. That's just their whole thing. And my daughter and I were talking about how that's really never been our thing, even though she was a soccer player and whatever. And I'm like, why is that? I am my own problem, but I'm also my own solution. So what you just described with being a marathon runner can be the same exercise for working out or doing anything that you've wanted to do, and you just replace marathon runner with exercise or starting a business or losing weight, or the way that you described it, where it's not just a one-dimensional thought. Like, you have to be all in with it all. You have to live, breathe, and eat it, right? You can't just say it and dress up like you're one, and you can't just pretend it when you're in the mirror looking at yourself in the morning. But it has to be one within yourself, your brain, your body. You have to really just do it.
Yes.
Don't you think?
I agree with that completely. And it comes down to what is really important to you.
Mm-hmm.
You say you're not big on working out.
Yeah.
Okay. But what does that look like? Maybe you don't like to play tennis anymore, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Listen, through your life, you are going to be 1,000 different women, more than that. And with each growth, with each new iteration, you may have other priorities. There may be other things that are important to you, and that's okay. So looking at working out, why do you want to work out? Why is that important to you? What's the payoff? If it's something that we want to do because we feel like everybody else thinks that we should be doing it, that's a really challenging space to be in. But when you come to a space of, do you need more movement in your life because you want to lose weight, because maybe you're borderline diabetic or something's going on when you're with your health, that becomes a different story. My initial growth into the coaching world, leaving healthcare, coming into the coaching world, was I was a nutrition and fitness coach. And people used to ask me all the time, what is the best exercise for me to do? And my answer was always the same, the one you enjoy.
Right.
Because don't drag your ass to the gym to lift weights if you hate it. Because your brain is going to fight you every step of the way. Find something that you enjoy. Find something that lights you up. Find your why. Why is this important to you? And when you attach to why it's important to you, then you can go from there. And that's where it comes back to finding what's important to us. Not what anybody else thinks that we need to do, but what's important to us and where we are coming from. And you alluded to the habits that we get stuck in. And that's a big part of a problem. We get stuck in a habit loop of our life. And our lives are pretty much driven by our subconscious. 95% of what we do is driven by your subconscious. Your conscious brain is only making decisions for you 5% of the time.
Wow.
So if we don't allow ourselves space to stop every now and then and look around and see what's going on in our life, we're going to get to the end of our life and we will have been a hamster on a wheel for a very long time. Give yourself that space. Give yourself the space to stand back, look around at your life and say, okay, I love this. I don't love this. This is great. This is not great. I want to change this. I don't want to change this. But having an awareness, and that's one of my favorite words, is awareness, is we have to be aware. We are programmed. We're programmed by our phones. We're programmed by what we take in all day long. And we have to take back that autonomy. We have to take back personal responsibility. It's like I was talking about with having the big feelings and moving through the emotions. We doubt our ability to get out on the other side of that.
Yes.
We feel like if we allow ourselves to go into a space of grief or sadness or whatever, we won't be able to get out. No, we will. As human beings, we are so freaking powerful. We dim our light so much, especially as women, because, we're programmed to be a certain way and do things a certain way. And being a strong, powerful woman is not about being a masculine woman. We have such a beautiful gift of nurturance and intuition and knowing, but we don't allow ourselves the time and the space and the breath to go into that and look at it. And I see this with our girls. Confidence is such a big problem. Yeah. Confidence is a problem for women and confidence is a problem for girls. And my focus for 2025 and moving forward, I'm still going to be working with my women, but what I realized working with a lot of women who are carrying these stories of not good enough, not worthy, these limiting beliefs, it's the premise of stop pulling people out of the water, swim upstream and find out why they're falling in. How is it that women, and I'm not leaving men out of this, but I primarily work with women. How is it that we're getting to this space? And doing research and looking at studies and statistics, it's really scary. Girls somewhere between the 6th grade and the 8th grade lose 50% of their confidence and then they never get it back.
When you said that before we started, I was shocked.
Why is that happening? And I have my ideas around why it's happening. And this is why I'm putting together the program that I'm putting together. But it shouldn't be that way. Girls are like, they're at this beautiful prime space in their life. And social media is just, it's horrible because this comparison culture, and we're breeding this whole generation that is driven by comparing themselves to other people. Yep. And they want to be like the crowd. But here's the thing about being like everybody else. There's a lot of competition when you want to be like everybody else because everybody else is already like that. Why not be original? Why not stand out? That's why you were put here. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, when you talk about being in a career or being an entrepreneur or whatever, if you're like everybody else, you are easily replaceable.
Yeah.
There are just over 8 billion people on the planet. We're all different, and it's okay.
Thank goodness.
And you look at leaders, you look at the great minds, they're not like everybody else.
Right, that is true.
We need to stop pushing this story that you have to look a certain way or be a certain way. We need to encourage individuality. We need to encourage self-belief, and we need to start teaching them how to knock out these limiting beliefs because life is going to come at you. Right. I think the greatest gift that we can teach our kids is resilience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know for myself personally, thank goodness that my kids, my ex-husband and I are very fortunate. Even with all of the highs and lows and the trauma that they've gone through, they have learned to get through it. And they know that they can't go around it. They can't take a plane and fly over it. They have to deal with it, whatever it is, to experience it and get out on the other side. I will say that it's so interesting. I grew up in a pretty idyllic, homogenous household. Very fortunate, grateful for that foundation for the first 18 years of my life. Definitely set the table for how I've been able to move through my life and where I'm at today at 57. I will say that the downside of that homogeny and everybody being somewhat similar with very little difference of opinion, or maybe there were two opinions and that was really it, is it was in and of itself limiting the environment sometimes. Like you are not your environment and the environment isn't you, but sometimes you become the environment because you don't know anything else. And I've always said that the biggest blessing that I've had in my life is that I've always worked. And wherever I was working, there were people from everywhere. And I loved that. It was Baskin-Robbins every single day. And Baskin-Robbins has 31 flavors for a reason was one of my dad's favorite sayings. He said, because not everybody has to like chocolate. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. How boring would the world be if we all felt the same way? When I was working, I was with people that grew up in a completely different environment than me. They look different. I'm a nice Jewish girl from the northern suburbs of Chicago, but there were a lot of people that had never met a Jewish person in their life. They thought I look Irish, I'm Jewish, whatever, because of my white skin and reddish hair. But I loved meeting and getting to know other people that came from different cultures, different environments, different part of the country. I thought I had problems in my personal family life, which were traumatic for me. But meeting people and getting to know them seriously and understanding that there are people that are suffering trauma that I could never imagine dealing with. And I know that my work experience helped to strengthen my resolve, my grit, my perseverance, all of that. And I wasn't insecure about that. I knew that I would be okay. Somehow, some way, I would get through whatever shit was thrown my way or whatever I might run into as I go through life. And I do believe that having that opinion and that strength within me somehow, I think like in a way has rubbed off on my children. I took the lessons of my upbringing and of what I needed to help me grow as a human being and mature and take care of my life and all my decision making. But what made me different compared to maybe some of my lifelong friends? How was I able to just say, thank you for the lessons. I'm moving on. I'm taking everything and embracing whatever comes my way.
Yeah, I don't think that any of us can really pinpoint precisely why we take the lessons that we take. One of the biggest keys, I think, to having joy in life, which is curiosity.
Yeah.
So when you're curious, let's go back to Baskin-Robbins. Imagine if Baskin-Robbins had stopped at vanilla and said, okay, cool, we hit on this really amazing ice cream, but we're not going anywhere from there. Okay, fine. Some people would have been really happy. Having that variety and having that, you walk in with this curiosity, like, I'm going to try something new today. And listen, I've tried flavors of ice cream that was like, ew, gross. Like, I don't ever want to try that again. And that's cool because there's flavors out there that are really amazing. And I think that's all of us. But being curious and asking questions and wanting to learn more, it expands your horizon on what's possible in life. Everybody's different. Everybody's unique. I believe we have something to learn from every single person. Mm-hmm. And when we've been through things, we can either decide that we're a victim to what happened to us, or we can decide what we want to do with that, what we want to do with that lesson. And sometimes you have to sit with that lesson for a little bit. I use the analogy that they say, if you fall off the horse, get back up and get on it. I disagree. I say, sit your ass on the ground for a little while and figure out what happened. So when you get back on that horse, you do it better because you learned something from when you fell off. And I think that's part of the struggle with kids these days is kids need to fail. Yeah. We all need to fail because that's where we learn. And if you've lived a life where you've never had a challenge, and it sounds like maybe you didn't have challenges for the first 18 years, but you've had your fair share since then.
Right.
And you've dealt with it and you've gone through it and you've done the thing and you've faced it. You've allowed yourself to feel. But again, it comes back to that was your experience. But you look at the world outside of yourself and you're curious. And that was one of the things I loved about how we connected at the airport. Mm-hmm. You just came up to me and we started talking.
Right.
And it was a mutual curiosity about each other. And that's how, I think that's where joy, I think that's how we expand. That's how we learn by immersing ourselves and staying curious and open.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. You're an extraordinary human being. You really are.
Thank you.
And you come by it honestly. Because of you, I have allowed myself to experience so much joy since I've been here in Florida in a way that I thought was possible. I was hoping it was possible, but I've made it possible. And I thank you for that so much. And for the introductions to other people that are in your sphere that are just as impressive as you are.
You.
Everybody, Suzette is going to have her contact information and everything about where you can find her in the show notes once the podcast drops. Hope everybody has a great day, and don't forget to mind your nest.